I just think what we're missing in this conversation is we have to recognize men and women, we love differently.
We do.
And our expression of love, I think, by a lot of women, in particular women who, unfortunately, those who haven't grown up around men don't understand how men communicate love. Like we were talking about the love language. I know acts of service and quality time for most men, that's their love language, the top two, followed by words of affirmation. Um, and
Physical
but
touch.
usually receiving gifts is on the bottom for most of us. We don't communicate all the way that way. Those of us who are not lacking, I will just say, in our overall development. Those of us who are insecure and are less secure with ourselves as a person, we have to shower you all the time with gifts and stuff because we don't have anything else. We don't have the intangibles. So we have to give you the tangibles. So unfortunately, some, and I think this is what Owusu was talking about. Some women have been raised to see as an expression of love, receiving gifts and certain things solely, and they don't see. And I think it's true for men too, being dismissive of one another and the expressions of love. That's why if I'm looking to be involved with a woman and I'm sincere about in my intentions, one of the early conversations she and I will have will be about our love languages and understanding what they are. And we can, and I like to share what that is so that we know, so that she knows when I'm doing A, B, and C, that's an expression of love for me. And when she's doing A, B, and C, I understand that that's an expression of love from her. Also, in that conversation, learning what she more so appreciates as an expression of love, or he appreciates as an expression of love. So that every once in a while, for example, receiving gifts, which is on the bottom for me, and I know, and if I know it's near the top for my woman, for example, I'm going to be mindful of that periodically. But you can't expect that when that's not my expression. You can't expect that as a regularity, as a point of, all the time, because that's not how I express it. And much like, Owusu was saying, our expression as men, we're, the protectors and things of that nature. Our expression, we're going to make sure that you're protected. When we go to places, we're always on the swivel. We sit at a certain position in a restaurant with our eyes geared, we're always mindful of those things.
Say that.
Where we sleep in the bedroom, closer to the door, particularly. Like we think of that. Those of us men in particular who were raised by men, we know the difference because there's a difference between malehood and manhood. Malehood solely requires you to become an adult from like childhood to to being an adult male. Manhood, there's a sense of responsibility, accountability, and things of that nature to which we are required our duty. And part of that, when we so our love is in Disney. It's not for men. Men, we aren't Disney love. Our love is maybe more like the movie 300. This is Sparta, or some other, or like Django. Our love is a little bit different, and it's not going to
Yeah.
be pretty. If you're looking for shiny and pretty and glossy, that's not how we are. We don't shine up our love in that way, you know. So I just think, and you know, I love what the ladies were saying, and I love these conversations because one of the great qualities of any successful couple having is to listen with the intent to understand with the and not with the intention to respond, not just to respond. And understanding what that means, listening with the intent to understand doesn't have to mean I have to agree. I just want you to understand. And vice, I want to understand you. I want you to understand me. We don't have to agree, but the understanding part is very essential and very important. So yeah, I'm loving these type of conversations, and I hope we get into the whole as we talking about relationships in our age group in particular, like and dating
Yeah,
for
yeah.
those of us who is like what that's like. You
And
know,
that is
that's
something I really
Well,
want to
well,
know
let
too.
me ask you a question on that point, Ian. Well, everybody, just piggybacking on what you just said, Ian, and I agree with everything you all said. I think there's some great points there. One of the things I wanted to also, sorry, well, that's my phone. One of the things I wanted to ask in relation to relationships, I think that pride. So I think what happens also too over time, are people too prideful for love?
mm,
So I think what happens is that it's not just being lazy per se, but I think and I'm not talking about just women, I'm talking about men and women. I think there's a level of pride, like, you know what, I ain't doing that because here's the thing about love. When you just love and romance, there's when you're at full throttle, there's very little pride. You're not scared to put out too much of yourself. And I think what happens over time, people start to be like, I'm not about to put myself all the way out when that person's not putting themselves all the way out. And you're constantly looking. So it's like, well, if this person has a moment where they put themselves all the way out, I'll put myself all the way out. So I think men and women alike are constantly reviewing each other like that in relationships, and that's where I think you don't get the full sense of each other. So regardless to who starts it, that's why I talked about vibe and energy. So what happens a lot of times when you meet someone new, all of that's gone because you're not like, okay, I'm going to reserve so much of myself. When you're trying to show interest, you just show all the interest, full throttle. You hit them with everything. You know what I'm saying? Because you want to, especially if you want to show that person you interested. And then what happens over time, you start to do a lot of that. So I think a lot of the issue is pride. So I wanted to ask, what you all think. Are people too prideful? Because I think that that's a major inhibitor when it comes to romance and dressing sexy or looking sexy, because I agree with Tanja. As a man too, like I always, that's just me. I've always, carried myself in a way where I want to make sure I'm fresh. You know what I'm saying? I'm not fresh every single minute of the day, but I try to be, you know what I'm saying? Like fresh, in shape, all that stuff, and all that should be for you anyway. You know what I'm saying? You should be trying to do those things for you anyway. And I think it's just, if you're not trying to do those things to a certain extent, then you also can't expect your partner to be, excited about you either. So, but pride though, what do y'all think about the pride aspect?
I think that men are very prideful, especially and I thought it
Straight to the
was
men, huh?
yes. I think that I guess because I know more women, I guess, and women we are typically, not all, this doesn't apply to all, but typically we are very emotional beings, and we will tend to follow our heart, go with our heart, and put ourselves out there and let someone know, hey, I'm really feeling you, or how they're feeling as things start to progress. Even finding love over 40 is difficult because it's surprising
Over 40.
how many men, I'm sorry,
Who's over 40?
man, right? Um, I'm surprised at how many men over the age of 40 still have an immature mindset about being in a relationship and falling in love.
Oof.
These are men who call themselves mature. Like I had a guy tell me, "Oh, I'm wildly mature, wildly mature." Okay, we'll see about that. Um,
You said
However,
wildly mature?
wildly mature.
if
Those
he
are the
if
words.
he only knew about your views on ankles.
Well, he had nice ankles,
Yeah,
so that
Kinkles.
was not an issue. But th- but yet the way you handle things is not necessarily in a mature way. And I think that it does go back to a lot of pride about, well, I don't want to give too much of myself. I don't want to show too much of myself. Um, I don't know whether there's a mindset of it looking or the appearance of it being weak to show too much emotion or to open yourself up to be vulnerable, which is extremely difficult for a lot of men to to have that vulnerability to acknowledge the fact that this person has the ability to hurt you emotionally. And a lot of men especially, I find, are so terrified of having another person be have the ability to hurt them emotionally that they will either keep up a wall or just not allow themselves to go to that point anyway. And it's really a shame that men who call themselves mature, who are well over the age of 40, still have that mindset that they have not reached a level of emotional maturity to be able to handle something that they say that they want. You cannot say that you want to be in a relationship. Oh, you want to be in love. You want to get married and all this stuff. Yet you're afraid to be vulnerable. You're afraid
Oh,
to
you
give of
got
yourself.
Tanja clicking that pen like she like
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm
she
just
clicking
saying that.
she clicking that pen with some passion, boy. I
Yo,
was like,
I mean,
okay,
And
I
she's
mean,
on Jeopardy.
she
Yes,
down
yes,
she over
baby.
there about to write a whole essay with bullet
yes.
points.
'Cause
I
I got
think
you.
by all means, Tanja, go ahead.
I think Yaya just nailed it. Is it Yaya?
Mhm.
I think she nailed it. Like, I don't think it has anything to do with pride. I think for men, it has everything to do with vulnerability. I think she nailed it. I was just waiting to say that because I I don't think it's about pride. I think it's about vulnerability. I think that men tend to stay in their heads, and anything that represents weakness, anything that puts them, you know, in a position where they have to be the aggressor in 2025 or the one to assert themselves in a way where they are showing love, care, anything for someone that they're not sure about. They're just not willing to do that.
Hmm.
And I think this behavior, I'm not going to say it's the only thing, but I think I ask myself all the time, what is going on with the black family?
Mhm.
What is going on with black men It's a whole other and women? But because we're talking about men,
Sure.
what is going on with black men? Why can you not, communicate? Why can you not, say, I've been hurt, I've been disappointed, I've had my kids taken away from me, whatever the scenario is, right? Like the best way to be, and this is what I tell people, for women, I say the same thing. If you can't be vulnerable, you can't be in a relationship, period. You might as well pack your shit and go home.